Tom Riggs with MindWire here, and we're going to talk about building a talent component of your annual plan. But of course, there's no time like the present, right? You don't have to wait for your annual plan. Anytime's a good time to get on the talent bus here, if you will. And so I'm thrilled to have my longtime friend and colleague, Jennifer Bookspan, with us. She's the CEO of Forbes.Jobs, and you can see her PI pattern there, right? We don't do a webinar without showing our guest PI pattern, because who would we be if we didn't talk a little bit about that? But she's had a long career in talent and recruiting, and ran her own recruiting practice for a long time, joined Zillow and kind of built their recruiting practice from the ground up. And then smartly, Forbes.Jobs said, we want to bring all that expertise here. And so at the end, Jen's going to talk a little bit more about what Forbes.Jobs is doing, but it really is kind of an interesting kind of curated marketplace experience for highly vetted recruiters, talent, and organizations to kind of come together and certainly execute searches and find talent, but also find resources, best practices, et cetera. And backed by Forbes, obviously, they've got a ton of eyeballs and readership and brand. And so thrilled to have Jen here with us today. So Jen, thanks for being here. And funny story, we've probably known each other 15, maybe 20 years. I don't want to say 20 because it makes us sound old, but it's been a while. When we got to know each other in Phoenix and then found out we grew up in small towns in Michigan about 10 miles apart from each other, kind of thing. So it is a small world out there. But Jen, thanks for being here today.
Absolutely. Yes. Our teams played each other in sports in high school. So
that's right. Yes. So what we're going to do here is just start off and talk a little bit about some of the data in terms of what's going on out there in the world of talent and what's coming. And Jen's going to share a little bit of her perspective on the data, as well as kind of the conversations that she's had with CFOs, CEOs, et cetera, and how they're feeling about things, and give you some of that. And then we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about what are some of the practical things you can do? What are some of the best practices that she's seen? What are some of the not best practices that we need to kind of broom out of our closet and throw in the dumpster if we're still doing them? And then some ways to really kind of take out some pragmatic, immediate applications. And as always, as we go through this, use the chat to ask any and all questions that you might have. That's what Jen and I want to do, is really make sure that you're getting to tap into her expertise. And I think when part of what I think has been part of Jen's leadership style and the way she's always done things is with quality, right? We've all seen recruiters, especially headhunters, et cetera, who just want to chase an invoice. And I think part of what Jen's been able to do is say, I'm in it for the more strategic, longer haul. And that means you do things of quality because you build a reputation, whether that's as an employer or as an individual recruiter. And so I think what you'll appreciate is that lens and that thoughtfulness in terms of where she comes from, right? And we know there's no free lunch. You have to do the work, but you can't do everything perfectly. And so I think she's going to help with pragmatic approach to some of those things for sure. So, all right. Jen, anything else to add before we jump into the data here?
No, I thought that was great. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Okay, so we're going to kind of show you some slides and data, get Jen's perspective and kind of takeaways from it, and I'll throw in my nearly worthless 2 cents at the end here and there as well. But I think the first thing we want to talk about is this, which is this dynamic on what's happening in the workforce numbers.
Yes, and this is everyone knows this. We talk about it all the time, but there's a couple of exciting things. For the first time ever in our history, we have 5 generations working together, which is cool, but it's also complicated, and you have to think about it, and you have to think about different needs for different people. The big thing that's going on right now is you've got baby boomers heading into retirement or some kind of different work space or area. Next year alone, baby boomers will be turning 65. 12,000 baby boomers a day will be turning 65 in 2024. So you have a huge shift in a very large population. When you look at the generations, you've got Gen X, and Gen Z, which are smaller generations as a whole. So as a trend in the workforce, we're going to have less people available in those traditional leadership roles and in early talent. So some things that you may want to be thinking about is we need people that may be stepping up into bigger roles sooner. Are they going to be ready? Are they prepared? Do we have them in a good development place to do that? So it's all things that are happening, but this is just something we can't change. It's a generational shift.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the other things here is you look at the numbers and you go, all right, despite what the news and everyone has talked about from a macro economy standpoint the last few years, there certainly has still been this acute shortage of enough talented people, right? Organizations, all of our clients, or the vast majority have felt that. It's still been really hard to get really talented people, even when the economy's been tough. And I think in your conversations with CFOs, particularly Jen, they're expecting a big change. So can you talk a little bit about, all right, it's already been hard. What's the next couple of years going to look like on that front, if you will, at a macro level?
Yeah, so we know that this year's been a little bit of an unusual year. So we've had some layoffs. People have kind of gone up and down in the market. But and in our conversations with 5 CFOs of public companies in the last few weeks, they all believe that we're going to still stay a little slow right now. But by Q2 of 2024, there's going to be a massive uptick in the market because we're going to have to continue. In order to fuel our economy, we have to keep going. So sooner or later, we're going to have to keep hiring. And so I would say to you, think about that now. Don't wait until Q2, Q3, or you're sunk because everyone's already at the race. So my inclination is this is why we're talking about this now is think ahead because you want to get a hold of and attract that talent today, even if you're not ready to hire.
Right. So I think if you haven't seen the numbers on the generational population differences, it's worth knowing because that just says there's just fewer people that are going to be available. And then to Jen's excellent point, if you think about leaders, you're going to have a disproportionate number of leaders retiring, leaving the workforce, changing that role. And that's going to put an outsized impact on just the differences in pure numbers of people, let alone leaders who tend to be more senior folks in your organization. So that's number one, is that's not going to be temporary and it's not going to be related to where the economy is. It's just the reality of what we all are going to have to deal with for sure. We got to get ready. So that is a good segue to red flag number 2, right?
Not to be the bearer of bad news.
Get you excited and feeling wonderful on these first 2 slides, everybody. But hey, we have to deal with truth and facts if we're going to do something about it. So Jen, when you shared this with me, I was incredibly struck by that kind of line on the bottom there, about 100 for every 100 open jobs, 76 available workers.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, if you would.
It's just the fact. It's really a math problem. We just, as I said, we don't have enough people to do what it is we need to do. So we have to think more creatively. And I really want you to think about 2023 because it has been an unusual year. So even in an unusual year, we have a 3.8% unemployment rate currently. So there's still low unemployment. So it's positive for employees because I think in general, we have a very strong workforce opportunity. But for companies, think about the 76 people that are available and you want the top 20% or 25%. So how are you going to be competitive here? How are you going to have a competitive advantage? And we have some ideas for you. So don't be too afraid, but you have to think this is going to be a war on talent. If it isn't already, it is. I'd say think about this through 2030 for sure.
Yeah, it already has been. It's gonna get a little harder, and so you have to sharpen that saw up on those things around attraction, selection, but also retention and development. In some cases, in years past, for organizations, especially at the leadership level, they're looking internally and saying, do we have enough people that are ready to move into this leadership role, or maybe the next leadership role, or those things? Sometimes that could be filled, even successfully, by going out and buying some talent, right? Finding those outside hires who've been there, done that, and bringing them in. I think for a lot of reasons, some of it just being the math, that's going to be harder to do, and certainly more expensive. Because if nothing else, right, the pandemic has taught not just top talent, but lots of talent, most talent, that they have options, they have choices, they have more career mobility than they thought they did, and they're exercising that, right? And we've seen it. And so I think for many organizations, sometimes going and getting those outside hires was great and worked, and adding that to internal development was successful. But again, it's just math. It's going to be harder and more expensive to do that. And I know for lots of organizations, they've also found that, the unknown is undefeated, if you will, right? We hire an outside candidate and they are work-free and magical and they look lovely, versus your internal people who are a little bit, they got some bruises and scars along the way that. But I know for lots of organizations, they found sometimes outside hires are as risky as anything else, versus developing from internally and thinking about how do we do that and put more emphasis on that in a way to kind of help us with this math problem. So yeah, this is the second really like up with people, aren't we feeling excited slide of data for you. But again, right, we got the facts, we can do something about it. And I think some of that leads to what we're going to talk about next, which is this piece, right? Desire for development and career opportunities. Things have changed, Jen.
Yeah, I think this is really important, because what we really want to talk about here is, what do people care about? And this is important if your organization isn't thinking about this. 87% of millennials and 90% of Gen Z care about career growth and development. And it doesn't mean that baby boomers and Gen X don't care about it. They do. But this particular group really cares. So what are you doing about that? Are you thinking about that? Have you put that into your strategy? We'll talk about that later, but that is a really important piece of how these two generations are going to care. That's going to be about retention and engagement, and just being able to grow that talent in your organization. And I think that the other side on the right is just really more across the board, all generations, top three things. Why people are leaving. Why did people leave their positions in 2022? Number one, actually, these are all equally important, but lack of career development advancement comes up again. Unsustainable work expectations, just expectations that are way beyond what is realistic, or they, maintaining a position. And then just not having a leader who really understands that person, understands who they are, what they need. Those are very deep connections that as to why someone may make a move.
Right. And when you think about recruiting good talent, right, whether that is you are hiring people from the outside, or you're wanting to develop and grow people in your own organization, you're still recruiting that talent, whether they're internal or external. And these are things that good, savvy candidates are going to want to understand and know about your organization, right? And it doesn't mean you can go try to be perfect at all things tomorrow, but it does mean that you have to be really deliberate about highlighting the things about your organization, your culture, the things that relate to these things that you do have a really nice story around, right? Part of your recruiting strategy, both externally and internally, has to hit some of these things. And I just want to talk a little bit about why for a second, because every generation kind of looks at the next and goes, oh, they're a disaster and no, everything's going to be horrible and all this stuff, right? Like these youngsters, gosh darn them. There's really good data actually that says about millennials and Gen Z, really good research. It says they're no less hardworking, they're no less committed than the generations before them. And as leaders, they are equally as good as those Gen X and baby boomer as leaders when they get into that role. But I think this career development advancement potential thing comes from they've watched their parents who, all right, Jen and I grew up in Michigan in the auto industry. You used to go to work for Ford or GM and you would have a retirement career. And these millennials and Gen Zs have watched their parents have the rug pulled out from under them when they thought they were going to be somewhere forever and found out that's probably not going to be the case anymore. And so they're adopting to the reality going, I need to be broadly skilled because that gives me some options. That gives me the ability to navigate a career and have some places to go and have a little bit of career security. And I think it can be a good thing, right? Look, who doesn't want employees that want to grow their career? And it doesn't always mean promotion. Sometimes it means I want to develop in this job or get broad and be a subject matter expert or learn a number of things. There's so many options here, but this is something that is to be taken advantage of, right? Because these folks want it and they're not unwilling to work for it, right? And that's important. On Jen's other 2 points, unsustainable work expectations, right? One of the things that you'll see and have heard later is, this is just an example, but everyone must go back to work all the time. The data says almost no one wants that, right? That's just one example, but this is, again, where all politics is local a little bit. Like, what does that mean for one person versus another? That's what leaders have to find out and know. And for our PI fans here, not having a caring leader. What does caring mean to a low B person with a PI? It's not sugar and honey and all this kind of stuff, right? It's very different than it might be for a high B person. So caring is really more about, it's not about nice. It's not about soft, right? It's about, they understand who I am as an individual and know what makes me good and valuable, and also know how to communicate, motivate, right? Care is expressed by, I understand and I get you. It's not about kind of the, kind of softy caring stuff. It needs to get adopted by person. Lots of organizations have done good work on broad-based kind of recruiting, engagement, retention initiatives, right? Making sure comp benefits, total rewards are in a good place. Addressing things like making sure organizational communication and expectations are clear and that there's things that are done for career pathing, et cetera. Lots of things that are broad-based that are important fundamentals. But once you get the fundamentals right, and sometimes that can take a lot of time, money, effort to do that, and it prevents you from sliding backwards. You can't think that, if we offer pet insurance to everybody, boy, that's going to drive more retention and engagement. Once you get the fundamentals hit, then it's about how do you help your leaders manage individual people as individuals and know what matters to one person versus another. And that's where you can build on kind of that, the basics that are broad-based, total rewards, how you kind of treat careers, opportunities, those kind of things for everybody. They're not unimportant. But I've seen lots of organizations and been part of them where that takes a lot of time, money, and effort, right? Maybe you even go to town halls and you're out hearing feedback from employees and you can look at the numbers and go, we haven't seen a lift, and that was a lot of effort. It's not that it wasn't good. It's that we got to take the next step and think about, how do I get this knowledge of the three things that really help, people stay into the leader's hands so they can think about, how do I figure that out, right? And how do they do that? Well, they should ask the people that are working for them about what this means to them and what it looks like as a starting point. But that's how you can, I think, build on this. But this career development advancement potential is a great opportunity, right? Who doesn't want a more versatile, capable, skilled employee or workforce, for sure. So, it's changed, but I think there's good news here, right? In terms of if you can leverage it a little bit. So,
100%. Yes.
Yeah. Jen, let's go to something that I think is going to have a little controversy to it, which is the whole remote hybrid thing, right? So I'll show the data here and then you can comment a little bit about it. So,
yeah, I know this is we hear about, it's so funny because you think this is going to go away, right? It was very hot topic, just pandemic, post-pandemic. And I feel like now it's the bottom line is, if you look at the data, it's not going away in the end. I think that there definitely remains a huge interest and desire to have flexibility. And I know not all companies can do this. Not all roles are are designed for this. So we get that. I don't think it's every single situation, but I do believe if you have the capability as an organization to really think about what you could do, it could be huge for opening up the aperture of available talent for you. If you can do that. And I think next level thinking, if you can do that and you figure out a way to help develop and train and those people that are remote or have more flexibility in their schedule, and maybe you have to do it in a way that's different than traditional, that is like total next level winning strategy.
Yeah. As Bill is saying in the chat, that 97% number, that doesn't leave a lot of room for doubt in terms of how employees feel about this one. But I want to go back to that in a minute, Jen. But if you're on the side of, if you're in an organization where you have some version of hybrid, right? You have some of that flexibility. You hit on a key thing, which is you have to be really deliberate about development, because the distance of remote or hybrid, it just kind of makes everything harder from a leadership standpoint, right? But from a talent recruitment standpoint, what are some of the things with organizations that you see they have that available to them that they are or should be highlighting in terms of kind of being an employer of choice or being attractive? Are there things that come to mind where you go, if you have that available, here's how to lean in, or here's what I've seen do?
Oh, huge. I would just say attraction of talent. I think about, I have a recruiter who specializes in tax, and any company that is hiring tax professionals, if they have any flexibility, they're going to get, and that's a very hard, by the way, hard people to find. There's just huge advantages for attraction. And I think about women. I think about people who take care of children. I think about people who have, maybe they have elderly family members that they need to take care of. There's so many things that this creates an opportunity for people. So I think it's definitely attraction for sure in terms of the workforce, and just kind of going back to, we don't have that, we have a limited amount. So let's think about how we can get creative.
Yeah. I think to your point there too, like you think about people who have caretaking responsibilities for children, right? Or maybe elderly parents, et cetera. And especially when you think about talent that might be in the Asian American community, Hispanic communities, it's also just so very common that those elderly parents might actually be living with them, right? Not just that they're caring for them, and not just in those cultures, but commonly, right? And so automatically you become a potential employment destination for talented people who have any of those responsibilities on their plate, where on the right side, you might shut yourself off from it, for sure. So you're saying, scream it from the headlines if you have that option available in your workplace, right?
There are sites that just specialize in positions that are flexible. And I think about even geographically, you have people that maybe have to live somewhere for a certain reason. And for example, if you're only looking in Phoenix or only looking in New York City, but all of a sudden you open it up, it just opens up your opportunities for talent.
Yeah, absolutely. So the hard one, if you're one of the organizations on the right, that people have come back full-time all the time. And for some organizations, right, that's the right decision, or that's what they have to do. What are your thoughts in terms of how do you position that, if you will, or what do you lean into if that's the reality for you? Because there, hopefully and probably, there's some good reasons behind that. But what do you see your organizations or clients doing are doing that well?
I think that just naturally, I think about that development and growth, because we know that being together with people and people who can lead you and guide you, you're going to learn more. So I think if there is an opportunity for people to really grow from the experience, I think culture, if you have a culture where people want to be there and they want to be together and they enjoy it, that's huge too. Those are attractions for people, and I think a way to engage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Because we know that, right, it can be harder to do things remote and hybrid, right? Because you can't just walk down the hall or into someone's office and have those kind of little conversations that can add up over time with volume and ease and those kind of things. And if there's a culture that is strong or connection that is strong about that, then definitely lean into that, right? Because for some people that makes sense. But one other little nugget I would add here is we've seen a number of clients who, if they have some kind of hybrid environment, really successfully not treating all jobs equally, right? To go to Jen, your tax accountant role, is that a role that really needs to be in the office very much? Probably not, right? And if they are working more remotely, they're going to tell you that they probably prefer that and they can be more productive, right? They've got the green visor on and they're cranking away at the 9 key and then just being super productive that way. Though there's certain roles where you go, they could probably work at home 80, 90% of the time and 10, 20% come to the office and then be deliberate about connection. And then the other side of the coin, you have some roles where you go, maybe it's far more valuable to have them in the office a lot, right? Think about a sales team that maybe is phone-based. If I'm in the office and I'm hearing my compadres around me do things right and wrong 30 times a day, and I can have little conversations with others throughout the day, that might be much more productive for that kind of team than me sitting at home, right, trying to figure that out on my own. So I think it's not one size fits all. You can think about what the role needs and maybe do some differentiation there, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's okay to experiment. Like, don't be afraid. We have to be afraid. We have to be okay with failing, like trying and failing, testing and failing. And that's just our life today. So I think don't be shy about changing things as necessary.
Yeah. If you're on the right side on the 97%, one of the things I've seen a couple clients do there is what Jen just said, which is experiment. Maybe pick a few of those jobs that makes sense that they would be super productive remote and try it and see what happens with those folks when you give them that opportunity and room, just as a little contained pilot, and see that might help make some progress there in terms of, can we do that well in certain roles? But great. So let's talk a little bit about some specific strategies that you've seen and would recommend, and some things for people to think about in terms of tackling this math problem.
Yeah, so I'm going to mention several things, and I want to just stress and say, I don't want anyone to be overwhelmed by all these things, because I think the goal is we want to give you a lot of ideas with a thought in mind that maybe take one or two that you think you're capable of. And we can get into that in the second part of the program. But please understand, it's not about overwhelming you. It's just thinking about ideas. So number one, flexible work schedule. We really covered that already, but I think there's some winners here in terms of companies that have successfully accomplished this. And I think Nike, Delta Airlines, Apple, there's several that have really had some really good success with flex schedules. There's definitely more, and there's more that you can look into. Okay, internal talent. I cannot stress this enough, and it makes me laugh because I'm a recruiter. We're a recruiter, so I look at external talent, but this drives me bananas. I think it's frustrating to me that a lot of times employees have more success looking externally than internally for opportunities. And I think companies in general miss the boat on great talent that they maybe could give some development to, or a pathway for. And I would just say, if you're thinking about your strategic plan right now, the first thing you should be thinking about is, once you've identified your roles you're going to hire in 2024, are there internal people that could take on some of these opportunities or could be there when you're ready? And is there a path for them? And if you're not thinking that, I think it's crazy. I think that is just a simple way to create a win-win for your people internally, but also for you as an organization to not lose people as well. Another part of that, and I would say Kohler, there's some companies, if you ever want to look, Kohler and United Airlines, they're great. There's some really good just practice leaders on internal growth. Google has they have like a free, I know that not everyone is Google, but they have a whole skills-based development area where you can go and take classes and get skills for no cost. It's awesome. So I think there's ways to do that. But then in terms of skills and potential, once again, try not to think about people as in what they are today or who they are today. What could they be? What have we not developed in them? I'm always like, my curiosity is always about knowing who my team is and like, what do they have that I don't even know yet, and figuring out how to bring it out in them. So I think there are ways to do that aren't super formal, but you should always be thinking about what could be within your population, and or when you're hiring people, do they have 60%, 70% of what you need? And could you give them a little bit and get them over the finish line? So just thinking big picture. Just a huge one is just considering engaging in underrepresented groups. And when I say that, I really mean meeting them where they are, finding them, being purposeful. There's so many communities out there. That is such a big deal for your culture, for your thinking, there's just so many reasons why it's good for people, it's good for culture, but it's also good for business. I would just say one thing that came to me in the last several months, since I've been really doing a lot of research, is 76 million people in the United States alone are considered disabled at some point in their life. There are so many people in that population who want to work. And if they had a $500 accommodation, they could work. Or if you would let them work remote. I think there are just so many opportunities that could be awesome. And I just think we need to think differently and broader. And then I think the last is I want to just go back to the generational piece. We need to think about people who maybe think about those baby boomers or silent generation that want to give, want to be there, want to be a mentor, want to work on a project, but they don't want to work full time. They want to come in and be an expert, or someone who maybe just wants part-time or wants flexibility or wants to be project focused. Those are things where you can kind of bring people in and out as you need them in your organization, and they still help and they want to do it that way. So that's another thing I really want to stress, is thinking differently about how, like, the gig economy and how people work as well.
Yeah. A couple additional thoughts there, because I think those are incredible and great. Underrepresented is underrepresented, not under-talented, right? There's incredible talent there that's unbelievably well, capable, motivated, et cetera. This need to be engaged right where they are, right? And sometimes they're organizations, groups, associations, there's tons of those things where you can start connecting directly to reach out to those people and tap talent that isn't getting tapped as often and regularly, for sure. I think the piece about mentoring, right, or buying some of that expertise, I know that in talking to a couple different organizations who have platforms where they're building kind of experts and subject matter experts who are going to mentor others. And one of the questions I had for both was, is it hard to find people? And they said, no, gosh, no, we're not. We're paying them almost nothing. And we have more amazing people than we know what to do with. So like Jen said, I think it's not about the money. It's about, can I give back and give expertise? And a lot of these boomers and others that are, going to retire, but not retire, boy, is that an opportunity. And for them, it's not the money. The final, so go ahead, Jen, sorry, you're going to say something.
I just know a lot of people who said I would do it for free because it's such a giving thing. So yes, 100%. You just have to, you got to ask them. You got to create a structure for it. But yes.
Totally. Internal talent, like Jen said, right? Who do we have for what? So unpaid PI ad, right? That's part of where PI tools can come in. You can literally push a button in the software and say, show me all the jobs in my org that Hero might be great for, right? And that all of a sudden starts you thinking about not just the functional, maybe there's other areas, and career growth. And it's a way to do that and help an organization start mapping talent possibilities. Because in fairness to a leader, right, they probably know about their function and maybe some others. And if I'm Hero's leader, maybe I have an idea of the other jobs and what they require, but that leader is doing their job. It's hard for them to know everything that Hero could be good at. But all of a sudden, you give the software and go, well, here's the thing she's hardwired for that could be great, right? Then you have a starting point to go, aha, we've identified so many more potential paths. And then you can sit down with that person and, like Jen said, informally explore it. that sends a huge message to people. So there's some tools there that can help you with literally a button push to start mapping that and say, where do we go? For sure. Okay, so people strategies, we've got a few there. And I think like Jen said before, we're not saying do all of them. Pick one or two and do it really well. And that's probably way more than trying to hit, a long list of checkbox items. So organizational strategies, Jen. What do you see in here? What are you recommending? What are the best doing right now?
Yeah, I would just say culture. We talked about that a lot. Culture is a huge deal. People do want to know, who am I working for? What do they care about? What are their core values? What's it like in there? Do they have a purpose? Are they leaning into diversity, equity, inclusion? They're researching you. They're interviewing people. They're researching you ahead of even considering getting engaged with you as a company. So I think that you really have to think about that and make sure that you have, and that's hard because it's a little bit soft, but I think that's really important. Another part is just, this is basic experience. Basic, like I said to Tom the other day, send someone into secret shop, or you do it secret shop yourself. Like, how does it feel to go in and apply to your organization? Is it painful? Do you have mobile? Do you have to go on a laptop? Are you asking the same repetitive questions? I think 60% of people bail at some point applying for a job. I would, like 20 steps, I'm out, I'm done. So I think it's just like, what's your experience like? Are you, and can you fix some things? And are you following up? I think ghosting, I hear about ghosting every day. So I think that's just people feeling like they're not getting, they never get feedback, they never get follow-up, et cetera. But then I think as an employee, get that data from your employees. How's their experience? You got to find out what it feels like to be an employee and ask questions and get feedback and get surveys. I think those are all really important. And then we talked about this already, but really considering non-traditional skill development. I think there's some ways to do that isn't super costly, but I think that is a huge opportunity for people. And then in general, just your systems and processes, like that's probably a bigger challenge to take on, but how do people move with technology and systems within your organization, either as an employee or as a talent? Is it working? Is it not? Is it something you can fix? Is it something you can fix later? You should be really aware of where the bumps are in those processes. Something that's really come up of recent in the last few years is just organizational health, employee well-being, big deal. People bring a lot to the workforce. If you're not healthy, if you're not taken care of as a person, as a whole, it's really hard to be all that as an employee. And I think it's important. I think that has been a huge win and progressive moment, just to really be thinking about people as in making sure they're all around healthy as well. And that your organization, how you communicate with each other, how you work together is healthy. Psychological safety is significant for people to be successful, to be risk takers at work, to drive performance. And those things we don't talk about that much, but it's a really important part of a company. And then an obvious one, I think, how can we use robotics and AI? How can we, especially with repetitive things and repetitive tasks, huge opportunities, a great way to start dabbling with what can we do and how can we integrate as well.
I just want to go back on a couple things, Jen, and get a couple other thoughts from you on it. One is first an example on organizational health, employee well-being, psychological safety. I think the message is not you have to go be perfect at those things or be who you're not, but how do you highlight what you do have that does hit those boxes? Because that is really kind of universal, is I want to be in a healthy environment from a psychological, right, and other ways. But even in something like as simple as an EAP, maybe you have a really good employee assistance program as part of your benefits offering. If you don't talk about it and highlight it in a way of, hey, we really mean it. It's really important here. We want you to leverage it. We've got it for a reason and it's important to us. How does a candidate know it's important, right? You might not have a perfect environment, but how do you highlight what you do have that is true and authentic and make it clear to your employees and your candidates that this matters? Because if you don't say that it does, it's probably not getting on their radar. So I think that that's one thing. And the other thing I'd see is culture, values, right? It's just be clear about authentically what you do have. Don't say you want innovation if you don't, right? All of a sudden, people are going to go, you're not authentic, you're not real, you don't really want it. Because I can just look on Glassdoor and go, you can't bring ideas here, right? So be true to who you are and lean into those strengths. You're successful for a reason. But Jen, I wanted to get your thought too on candidate employee experience. I know that, right, it's different if you have a high volume, right, entry-level job versus others on that. But what's your thought around some of the must-dos in terms of that candidate experience on key touch points or key things you say, you have to have this and you really need to avoid this? Are there a couple of things that kind of anchor that for you?
Oh, well, the first one I already said, which is if your process is really difficult, you are going to lose people and they'll judge you based on how that experience is. And I think the other thing is to me, it's high tech, or if possible, let's put it this way, like do what you can do. But I also think it's high touch. So that doesn't mean you have to call everyone, but are you responsive? Are you letting people know where they are in the process? Are you fast? Because if you're fast with your responses, that is you're going to win. That sounds simple, but I feel like you're going to stand out. And that candidate may go, oh, I didn't get a job, but man, they were responsive. They communicated with me and they even right away told me that I wasn't going to be a match for this because blah, 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 or whatever. So I think those are simple things that you can do. We can go into it more, but I would just say job postings or job descriptions. I think you have to really be pushy and push your leaders on what is a requirement versus a nice to have. And because a lot of times people want all these things, but in the end, do they really need them? And are they missing out on great people because they're not really focusing on what matters in terms of behaviors, skill sets? And I'll tell you, women and people from underrepresented groups want to they want to know that they can do everything on that job before they apply. So what are you doing when you create these ridiculous positions with requirements that are beyond normal? You're eliminating people that could be awesome for you. So push your hiring managers on positions and keep revisiting them. Every time, keep revisiting them.
An excellent point. Job descriptions become a kitchen sinking. Let's just throw everything in and find the one magical unicorn in the US who has all of that perfectly, right? Some things are more important than others, and getting to the critical few that absolutely make them high performers and make or break. I know there's legal reasons on, minimum requirements, lift this, do that, you have to have, but you have a lot of latitude about describing that. And what Jen is referencing is some pretty sound research about the way men and women will apply for jobs or consider themselves for jobs. Men, if not qualified, right, they'll go, I'll figure it out. I'll just go for it anyways. What the hell, right? Like a lot of things, right? We just lumber through life and bang our head into stuff as men and blah, blah, right? But women, like Jen said, are more exacting. And if they don't know they're exactly qualified, they may not apply. And all of a sudden, we've just kind of unintentionally shut off a group of applicants who are going to be more conscientious or careful about that just from a gender difference standpoint. So unintentionally, it has that impact. And that has to be part of the thinking of what are the critical must-haves, not everything. And if you are looking at the chat, Janet Rivera's put a great example in there of a super experienced, talented person who's got a farm, right? And it looks like if there's some flexibility there, wow, we could get that kind of talent, right? In terms of leverage that. And, right, awesome, hire her in a minute, tremendous knowledge to offer a company. Right. And that's it too, right? Opportunistically, like when you stumble onto that, how do you create some maybe exceptions or carve out those things to go, this is talent I want to have? So Jen, one of the things I wanted to do is just go to Q&A, but as part of that, you talked a little bit about just assessing your situation, right? And you said, go through your own process, secret shop yourself and find out what it's like. Could you step back a little bit further and not just that as a candidate experience, but what else would you say would be a good starting point on the checklist to say, if you want to evaluate, kind of your overall attraction retention game, what are some other things you'd say, I'd first do this as another way to assess kind of where we are and what our strengths are and what we might want to address?
I think you can always start with data, because data is just a good measurement of, in general, how many applicants are you getting? What's your time to fill? Again, really like looking at the whole process. What is your interview process like? I think I understand hiring is really important, and I don't believe in just rushing, but I think that you've got to cut the fat, because people that's a big deal. If you can move, don't put something out for 4 months. I think that you're setting yourself up. So just really thinking about making an effective strategy where you really are not taking someone having someone give up 27 hours of their life to then not hire them. So I think it's just being really basically thoughtful and using that data, and then thinking about where we're getting our people. Is there something here that, measuring like our superstars? Should we be leaning into certain places as well?
Mm-hmm. To your point, Google did a research on number of interviews, and they found that when they did more than 4 interviews, they got no extra value in predicting performance, retention, engagement. All it did was slow them down. And so I think to your earlier point too, if you're moving quickly, part of that probably means you've got a good alignment on what you're looking for and you're able to execute. And it not only does it mean you can win from just a timing standpoint, it sends a message to candidates.
Yeah.
And that maybe is my next question, which is a lot of times I think busy leaders, maybe sometimes busy executives, kind of delegate is the kindest euphemism I can come up with. Delegate the recruiting and hiring piece to the HR function and don't fully own it. So for our HR friends there who are saying, I'm having a harder time getting leaders on board to fully own this, how do you help them make that argument? What do they get for doing it, and what's the cost to them if not, if you will? We might help them with in terms of thinking about that.
I feel you, HR leaders. I know how you feel. Here's what I would say. It's a huge difference. You guys know that. I know people that will, I just remember they'll stop in their tracks to make sure they're on time for an interview. And those are the kinds of things that matter. But here's what I would say. Pick one leader who is very innovative, willing to break things, coachable with you, and test it, try it. And one of the things I love to do, and if you're not doing this, I think it's a really great idea for you, is anytime you've got really good talent, I think leaders should be meeting with people at least once a month, maybe one or two, one person, to just as recruiters find awesome people, they should always just be open to having conversations. And I think that is a huge opportunity to not be under a pressure situation to hire. It's a great investment of your time, especially if it's areas where you hire or your organization hires. And then you start to get this, like, and candidates and people will do it too. Like, everyone's open to having an hour chat with someone. Generally, could be beneficial. So I think it's good for networking, but it's also good because you're kind of building your candidate pool. And then when you have something open up, you may already have people that you already have thought about or have talked to before. And it's a warm connection and not a cool one. And I know people are going to say, oh, that takes time and I'm not going to hire. I feel like, wow, that's a huge thing. So I would say pick someone who is going to be your partner here. Do it, and then let them win all day. And then all the other leaders are going to want to know what's the secret sauce going on over here, because it's probably easier for them to sell to their internal leadership than it is for you. Just my 2 cents.
I think that's so great, because your really great leaders are the ones that are your best brand ambassadors, both externally and internally. They're the ones who are more likely to think strategically about taking some time, right? And say, hey, I just want to have you do a little bit of this and let's see what happens, right? Maybe it's a conversation here and there with people outside or inside the organization, but see what happens, right? Because they're going to do the great branding work. You're not going to have to prep them for those conversations. You go, just show up and be you, and that's what we want to represent our org. They're the ones who are willing to do that. And like Jen said, nothing spreads like success. So that whole idea of try it with a few and do that work that might take a little time, it just shows up in other ways you don't expect down the road. So I want to pause for a second, Hero, and see if we have questions. If we don't, I've got lots more for Jen. I'll fire at her, but I want to give our attendees here a chance to ask anything they might be wondering about of Jen or get her perspective on it. So gang, you can put it in the chat if you have some questions. Please fire away at it. Otherwise,
I have a question for us, Tom.
Yeah.
So one of our participants is asking, in terms of like attracting candidates and also the flexible, workspace we've talked about, for those that want people on site, can you talk about relocation? It used to be a big thing that companies would offer relocation packages or assist with, relocating. That doesn't seem to be happening as much anymore. What have you seen? What do you recommend? Or what else can organizations offer if they're not able to assist with relocation?
It has changed for sure. I do believe that has changed, but most companies that I've talked to who want someone and they know it's going to be hard, they're going to be willing to relocate someone. And I think a lot of times these days it's more of, they'll give you maybe a bonus of some sort or some kind of a flat amount to make a move. So it might not be as crazy as the days when they would pay the percentage of your real estate. And I don't know how much of that is still going on. It might be. But I think that generally speaking, if they want you to relocate, you got to have something, if possible, to do that. Or you just want to move so much, you want to move to a certain destination, maybe that's of interest. But that's what I see as a whole.
Yeah. When there is relocation required because they really need to be there all the time, the retention stats on when someone doesn't relocate and commutes are significantly different. So for organizations, it might feel like, boy, that's a big outlay of cash to do a good relocation package. But the chances that you're going to retain someone if you don't go down significantly, even at executive higher levels where you might think, well, they're used to it, they can commute in and out. The data isn't great in terms of how that turns out. So spending that money, making that investment when you need to do that is probably going to help significantly the chances of retaining and engaging those kind of folks. So if you're going to do it, you kind of got to do it. Otherwise, you're just putting more risk factors in.
Yes.
I think we have time for one more question if you have one queued up for Jen before we have to end our time today.
I would just say, if you could summarize, Jen, one or two things that you feel like, if you want to get prepared for this, here's where to start. Here's what I would say, because everyone got a day job and this is part of it for all of us. But what are one or two ways to start thinking about this and get ahead of what we've talked about?
So if you're thinking about 2024, identify your key hires now. Start thinking about hiring them now, or even talking to people ahead of next year, even if you're not going to hire. So I think first of all, have a strategy around those key hires. Look at your process. If there are things you can fix that are simple fixes, do it, because I think it's a big deal. I think that whole development and just developing your internal talent is a big deal. Start with one group. Start with your first line managers. Start with your, very early stage managers. I just want to stress so much. Don't be afraid to experiment and try it with a few people. You don't have to do some big thing. I think start with a few, experiment, try it. Does it work? Let's keep going. I wouldn't go through some huge company-wide initiative without testing it first. And don't be afraid to fail. Just keep trying, because I think those are some key things that would make a difference. And just really being open-minded about the fact, hey, we have a limited number of people that are working. we have to get creative about how to retain and or engage and attract people from different thinking creatively. And I think the positive that I can't stress enough is I love the thought of getting more people in the workforce or getting them into roles or growing them that maybe wasn't an opportunity before. So that's the best part of this for me, is like giving people an opportunity to grow, make more money for their families, and develop that maybe would have been limited 10 years ago.
Right. Your good people, your best people are the ones that lean into that and make the most of that when they're given those opportunities, right? And those are the ones you're going to want to give those opportunities to by default. Yeah. I think the one other thing to me that I've seen clients do really well is kind of auditing who they are in terms of what is our brand, what is our culture, what is our identity, and just being really super deliberate about leaning into the strengths they have instead of trying to hit every checkbox and be everything to everybody, right? It's kind of like getting married. You might hope they're perfect, but they're not, right? What is the most important stuff that matters to you? Lean into that heavily instead of try to be all things to all people. It comes through much more authentically, and then people are going to see that, yes, that is you, right? I think we get worried about what we're not at the expense of kind of really trumpeting what we are as organizations, and that's distinct from one to the next. And really auditing, how are we coming across, right? That to me is another piece that could be easy to do and just tighten up a little bit.
Yeah, great point. Absolutely.
Hero, do we have any other questions from anyone?
Nothing else that hasn't already been covered. That's all the time we have for today.
Okay. I want to just say thank you, Jen Bookspan, CEO of Forbes.Jobs. And Jen, if they want to find out more about how your organization may help them, anything you'd like to add or offer or suggest on that front?
Yeah, you can check us out at Forbes.Jobs. You are welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn. We can probably provide my email address if anyone wants to talk further. Excited about what we're doing. We're building out what I would consider a very high quality career ecosystem for professionals through executives. And we've started with just vetting and really, really focusing on high quality resources. And MindWire Group is one of our partners in that community. So would love to talk if anyone's interested and help you solve your problems.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like I said before, with Jen, what you get is strategy and quality and thoughtfulness. So her offer of reach out is amazing. So if individual talent, organizations, even recruiters, there's resources and well-qualified resources at Forbes.Jobs in terms of if you're any of those folks, give that a look because Jen and her team are amazing. So thanks to Hero, and Jen, thank you again for joining us. It was an amazing job. And all of you who joined us today, we really appreciate it. And we hope you have a great rest of your week. And please reach out if we can help. Reach out to Jen or reach out to anyone here at MindWire. We're ready to do so. But we appreciate you and thank you and have a great rest of your week, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.